There comes a moment, sometimes after years, sometimes in a quiet moment of clarity, when we realize we're not crazy, we're not too sensitive, we're not difficult. We've simply been gaslit by someone who never wanted connection, only control. Narcissists don't play fair, they don't play honestly, and if we try to meet them with empathy while abandoning our boundaries, we lose ourselves in the process. But there is a way to disarm them, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with truth, stillness, and strategy. Setting boundaries isn't about being cold or distant, it's about choosing courage over comfort. Boundaries are how we say, I will not shrink myself to make you more comfortable. They are not punishments. They are declarations of what is and isn't okay in our relationships. When you're dealing with a narcissist, boundaries become more than helpful. They become vital. Because narcissists test limits not out of ignorance, but out of entitlement. They will push, manipulate, guilt trip, and charm, anything to keep access to your energy. And if you don't draw a clear line, they'll cross it every time and blame you for the fallout. That's the toxic cycle. But here's the power you hold. You can break it. When you say, I will not accept disrespect, even if you call it love, you're drawing a line in the sand. When you say, I don't owe you constant access to my time or emotions, you are not being mean, you are being self-honoring. Boundaries are how we protect our inner world. They tell others, this is where I end and you begin. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been conditioned to people please or fear conflict. But boundary setting is not the end of connection, it's the beginning of authentic connection. Because any relationship that requires you to betray yourself to keep the peace was never peace to begin with. So speak your boundaries like you'd speak your truth, with clarity, with calm, and without apology. Because every time you honor your own limits, you teach others how to honor you too. And in the presence of a narcissist, that may just be the most revolutionary thing you can do. You don't need to explain, over-justify, or beg to be understood. You only need to stand firm, kind, and rooted in the knowing that you are not available for emotional erosion. Boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges back to yourself. When you're in a relationship, personal, professional, or romantic, with a narcissist, every moment becomes a test, but not the kind of test where you're evaluated fairly. This is more like a game. And the rules, they change constantly. What they're really looking for isn't connection, it's control. And one of the most powerful ways they maintain control is by baiting you into reacting. They say things that feel like subtle jabs. They twist your words. They rewrite history right in front of you. And your natural response, especially if you're someone who cares deeply, is to correct them, to defend yourself, to prove your point, because it's maddening. You want to be heard. You want truth to win. But here's the hard truth. Every time you react emotionally, they win. They don't want understanding, they want attention. They want your energy, even if it comes in the form of anger, tears, or frustration. That energy feeds their ego. It reinforces their illusion that they have power over you. They don't care why you're upset, they just care that you are. So what's the move that disarms them instantly? Stillness. Not silence that's passive or repressed, but intentional stillness. The kind of calm that says, you don't own my emotional weather. It's when you stop trying to win an argument that was never about truth in the first place. It's when you stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Stillness starves the ego. because it denies it its favorite food, chaos. Narcissists expect drama, they expect you to fight, to fall apart, to spiral. But when you stay calm, grounded, and emotionally unavailable to the performance, something incredible happens. They lose control. They lose their script. You see, stillness is not weakness, it's clarity. It's you choosing your peace over their performance. It's power without shouting. It's presence without panic. And for the narcissist, it's unnerving because they don't know what to do with someone who doesn't bite the bait. This doesn't mean you stop speaking up for yourself, but it means you stop performing for someone who isn't listening. You learn to say, I don't owe you a reaction to prove my worth. You respond with dignity instead of drama. And that shift, that subtle, quiet refusal to participate in the cycle, that's what sets you free. Stillness is your boundary in motion. It's your dignity standing tall in the face of manipulation. One of the most disorienting things about dealing with a narcissist is the emotional whiplash. One moment you're being praised, the next you're being blamed. They project, gaslight, twist your words, and distort reality, not always with rage, sometimes with charm. Either way, their tactic is the same, to provoke emotion, because if they can get you emotionally hooked, they've already won half the battle. But here's the strategy they never expect: calm, grounded curiosity. Most people either lash out or shut down in the face of manipulation. But when you stay emotionally neutral and lean into curiosity, you take back the steering wheel. Instead of saying, that's not true, or how dare you twist things, you ask calmly, why do you think that's true? Can you help me understand what you mean by that? Where's that coming from? You're not plain dumb, you're plain smart. Because narcissists are masters of reaction, but they're terrible at reflection. When you mirror them with thoughtful, measured questions instead of raw emotion, you throw them off balance. You're not defending or accusing, you're observing. And that makes you a wild card in their script. They expect rage. They expect tears. They expect emotional proof that their manipulation landed. What they don't expect is a composed, curious voice that refuses to play defense. And here's the deeper truth. Curiosity keeps you in control, not of them, but of yourself. It gives you a pause between their chaos and your response. It helps you gather information, observe patterns, and stay aligned with your values. When you ask questions, you're not validating their behavior. You're defusing the emotional bomb they tried to throw at you. And don't be surprised if your curiosity frustrates them. It exposes something they work hard to hide, the emptiness behind their performance. When they can't get a rise out of you, they begin to lose interest because your emotional energy is the fuel they rely on. So let curiosity be your shield. Let it be your space maker. And most importantly, let it be a reminder. You don't have to prove your worth in every conversation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply ask a question they're not ready to answer. If you've ever been entangled with a narcissist, you know their behavior isn't random. It's rehearsed. It's a script they've been fine-tuning their whole life, one built on manipulation, charm, blame, guilt, and control. It starts off with flattery, idealization, and making you feel like you're the center of their world. And just when you're emotionally invested, the script flips. Suddenly you're too sensitive, too demanding, or not who they thought you were, and you find yourself constantly walking on eggshells, explaining yourself, trying to get back to the version of them that seemed so kind, so interested, so safe in the beginning. But here's the truth, that version was never real. It was a hook, the opening scene of their well-worn play. That's why recognizing the pattern, the script, is so powerful. Once you understand their cycles of love bombing, devaluing, gaslighting, and discard, you stop getting blindsided. You stop asking, what did I do wrong? And start asking, why am I playing this role again? Awareness is power, and once you see the playbook clearly, you realize something game-changing. You don't have to keep playing the same character. You are cast as the fixer, the forgiver, the appeaser, the one who absorbs the blame so they don't have to face themselves. But that's not your role unless you keep accepting it. The moment you choose to step off their stage, the whole act begins to fall apart. This is where rewriting your script begins. You stop chasing the apology that's never coming. You stop trying to convince them of your worth. You stop dancing around their moods just to keep the peace. And in its place, you begin to write a new narrative, one where you are no longer defined by their projections, one where you take up space without guilt, where your needs are not negotiable, where your healing matters more than their comfort. You might still hear the old lines in your head, maybe I'm overreacting, or maybe I should just forgive again. But each time you pause, reflect, and choose differently, you're reinforcing your new story, the story where your identity is not tied to their approval and your value is not based on how well you kept the peace. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about ego. It's about liberation. Knowing their script helps you stop blaming yourself for their dysfunction. Rewriting yours allows you to live beyond the trauma. And that right there, that quiet act of reclaiming, is the most radical move of all. There is a quiet revolution that happens when you choose to live in truth, especially when that truth makes others uncomfortable, especially when you've spent years shrinking, doubting, second-guessing yourself in the orbit of someone who has rewritten your reality one manipulation at a time. Narcissists build illusions about themselves, about you, about the relationship. They rewrite the past, distort the present, and make you question your instincts. And when you live in that fog long enough, lies can start to feel safer than truth, because truth requires you to confront what you've been tolerating. It asks you to stand alone for a while. It asks you to walk away from approval, validation, and fantasy. But here's the deal, truth is not easy. It's messy, it's often inconvenient, and it never comes without cost. But it's liberating. When you begin to speak honestly about what's really happening, when you name the gaslighting, the manipulation, the subtle cruelty, you break the spell. You stop protecting someone else's image at the expense of your own sanity. You stop pretending things are not that bad just to keep the peace. You stop abandoning yourself in order to avoid making others uncomfortable. And yes, it will rock the boat. It will cost you relationships, roles, and maybe even a version of yourself you once clung to. But what you gain is far more powerful: your clarity, your integrity, your peace. Living in truth doesn't mean you go on a crusade to call out every injustice. It means you stop participating in the performance. It means you no longer laugh at the cruel jokes, not at the twisted logic, or stay silent just to be seen as nice. And it means you say, that's not okay. This is what I experienced. Here's what I need. I won't pretend anymore. Narcissists can't thrive in truth. They require distortion to survive. So when you start standing firmly in your truth, even if your voice shakes, You become untouchable, not because they stop trying to manipulate you, but because you stop being available for it. And most importantly, truth brings you back to yourself, to your body, to your gut, to that deep knowing that never left, even when it was silenced. Truth won't always be welcomed. It won't always feel good in the moment, but it will set you free. And freedom, real, grounded, soul-deep freedom, is worth every ounce of discomfort. Dealing with a narcissist often feels like talking to a mirror that only reflects them. You show up open-hearted, ready to communicate, and what you meet is not a real person, but a performance, a persona, a carefully curated mask built to protect a fragile ego at all costs. And here's where so many of us get trapped. We keep arguing with the mask. We plead for empathy, we explain our pain, we show evidence, recall facts, even cry in front of them, hoping something will finally get through. But you can't connect with someone who isn't emotionally available. You can't reach someone who is more committed to winning than they are to understanding. That mask is not them, it's armor, and it's not your job to break it down. You see, beneath every narcissist's mask is something they desperately want to avoid: vulnerability. That's the silence behind the performance, the place where shame, insecurity, and unresolved wounds live. But rather than face that silence, they cover it with superiority, projection, and manipulation. The truth is, narcissists don't feel safe enough to be fully seen. And sadly, they often don't want to be. Their entire identity is built on controlling how others perceive them. So when you challenge that illusion, when you ask for honesty, accountability, or emotional depth, you threaten the system they depend on. That's why arguing with them is not just pointless, it's exhausting. You're not engaging with the real person, you're engaging with their defense mechanism. And no amount of logic, love, or confrontation can reach someone who refuses to take off the mask. So what do you do instead? You stop trying to convince them. You stop proving your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you speak your truth for you, not to win, not to change them, but to stay rooted in your own reality. No longer available for this kind of conversation. I hear the words, but the actions don't match. I choose peace over proving. And most of all, you listen to the silence. Not their loud distractions, not their guilt trips or gaslighting. You listen to what's missing: empathy, responsibility, mutual respect. When you stop arguing with the mask, you start seeing things clearly. You stop falling for apologies that come with no change. You stop hoping for potential that never manifests. You stop loving the idea of who they could be and start honoring the reality of who they consistently are. And in that clarity, something sacred happens. You reclaim your energy. You protect your dignity. You become unreachable to manipulation, not because you're angry, but because you're awake. Let them keep the mask. You don't need it to recognize your truth. Here's what you need to remember. Disarming a narcissist isn't about defeating them. It's about freeing yourself. It's not about proving your worth to someone committed to diminishing it. It's about no longer handing over your peace in the hopes of gaining their approval. These 5 secret moves: setting boundaries, choosing stillness, responding with curiosity, rewriting your role, and standing in your truth, aren't tricks. They're practices. They are quiet rebellions against manipulation, and they are bold declarations of self-worth. You don't need to yell to be powerful. You don't need revenge to reclaim your dignity. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is refuse to be pulled back into their drama and instead stand still in your integrity. You don't have to fix them. You don't have to convince them. You only have to free yourself. And that begins the moment you decide, I no longer shrink to fit inside someone else's story. You are not here to be controlled. You are not here to play a role in someone else's illusion. You are here to stand in your truth and walk in your power. And that is how you disarm a narcissist without ever raising your voice